Hello, everybody. Um we are living in really trying and testing times. The novel coronavirus, COVID-19, as it is called, has thrown all our lives entirely out of gear and made our lives very, very uncertain. We are living in dark times, not knowing what the way ahead is, what the road ahead is for us. Now, all those who are on the panel here today have been very passionate about the arts, particularly about cinema and television, all of us here, and which is what we are mainly going to discuss today. And we will seek the opinions of all these experts here to see how we can overcome this very, very difficult situation and perhaps find a solution which will be acceptable to not only the makers but also the viewers of the medium. So with this as a background, I would like to start off the discussions. We have with us, to start with, our senior most panel member, Mr. Shomik Bandopadhyay. Shomikda, as we fondly call him. Shomikda is a scholar, teacher, editor, publisher, translator, lexicographer, bibliophile, uh, and a critic of the arts, particularly cinema and theater. He has held a lot of very important positions at the national level in institutions like the National School of Drama or the Central Board of Film Certification. He has also been a former dean of the Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute. And recently, of course, he has also been the Rabindranath Tagore Fellow for, I think, Shomikda, it was Rabindranath Tagore Fellow at the School
National
of
Fellow,
Arts and
Arts and
Aesthetics, yeah?
Aesthetics, Jane.
Aesthetics at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. And he has held the ICCR chair at the Department of Theatre Studies, Freie Universität Berlin, from April to July 2014. Of course, way back, he was the regional editor of the Oxford University Press. I'm not going into all the other hats that Shomikda has worn because that will consume this entire program. And I'm sure that Shomikda himself is probably not readily aware of a lot of them because there are so many of them. So we thank you very much, Shomikda, for being on this panel with us. And then we have, of course, Abhijit Dasgupta, also a veteran. He has been associated with news since the early 60s and with television from the early 70s. He's an alumnus of the Film and Television Institute, Pune, former station director, Doordarshan, former dean at the Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute, bureau chief of WTN and production in charge of ESPN. Abhijit was a production head of NDTV and Astak for their election telecasts. Abhijit is a national coordinator for India and a past board member of Input, which is an acronym for International Public Television, the largest television organization of the world. He has received 2 national and 28 international awards for best documentary films. And then we have Aparna Sen, as everyone knows, actor, filmmaker, but doesn't stop at that. She has been an editor also with a leading publishing house in the city, and people have loved to read whatever she had to dish out. But of late, one of the new passions that she has, into which she has sucked in a whole lot of admirers, is a poetry session that she has started during these corona times. And she did, if I remember right, 60 of them on consecutive days, introducing poetry lovers or newcomers to the field of poetry, not only to Bengali poetry, good Bengali poetry, but also international poetry. And then, of course, it has now become a Sunday affair called the Sunday Salon, or what is it called? Kobita Robighar. Kobita Robighar, that's right. So that is a new avatar of hers that we have seen. So she certainly would have a lot of things to say here today. And of course, we also have with us Orgo Kamal Mitro. Orgo Kamal Mitro is an editing graduate from the Film and Television Institute of India, working in film and television industry for over 30 years, national award winner for editing in the year 2010 for Rituparna Ghosh's film Abohaman. So that having said with the introductions, I would like to straight away ask all of you, and I would like to request, if that is acceptable to all the panelists, that the opening remarks be kept to about 5 minutes each maximum, so that we can then interact and take up whatever each other have been saying and maybe react to what the others have said. Now, the question is, during these times, all plans have gone haywire. Everything has gone for a toss. So we would like to hear from all of you, what had been your plans which have gone awry during this period? Would you like to share it with us? So may I start with Orgo Kamal here?
Well, to start with, I had a few projects lined up, not only for the post-production, but something which I thought that I'd be doing on my own, a bit of direction, etc. So those things have definitely been pushed back, and I don't know for how long, because the deadline seems to be inexorably extending. Firstly, it was 2 weeks, then it was 3 weeks, and now into months. And we are having various kinds of deadlines, 14 days, 7 days, but the deadline is keeping on extending itself. So I am not really sure. A few little post-production work that were there. One is kind of stretching them. Work is kind of stretching to fill up time. So that way it's going on. Otherwise, frankly, I don't think I have got any future to look forward to right now, except that there are a few talks going on that we'll start shooting on such and such time and we can start working, etc. But I am not sure the way things are going on. I'm just not sure how things are going to shape up in this part of the country, because we are in a very bad way. We are climbing up the ladder to being kind of quite the first one amid the COVID coronavirus infected ones. So, and it's a pretty bad situation right now. It's nice to be hopeful, but at the same time, hope is kind of giving away to a certain kind of, if not entirely hopelessness, to a certain kind of mild despair, which is spreading a little longer. And things are getting a little too difficult because from every front, this lockdown and this whole situation is kind of eating into those areas. Definitely one area is the finance area. So one just doesn't know. One is kind of holding up. It's a kind of a grin and bear situation. That's about it.
Okay, thank you, Orgo. Now, in the light of what you said just now, I would like to add that just this afternoon, I was on an online meeting of a particular organization where there were some really good experts present. And they feel that this situation with the pandemic is not going to ease before the middle of 2021. And there is no way of any vaccine coming out also before that point of time. So possibly we have to keep on doing these kind of online things for a long, long time to come. We are getting used to a new way of life, a new kind of life. Shomikda is taking classes on online. You know, as I already mentioned, Aparna has been doing her poetry sessions online. Abhijit has been taking classes online. I have been taking classes online. We don't know how long this is going to continue. There is a kind of webinar fatigue that is also setting in among certain people. So Aparna, what is it that you had planned and what went wrong? How have you utilized your time to make up for work which probably you couldn't attend to earlier?
Well, we were supposed to start shooting in June. We were supposed to do all the prep. I'm actually now working at, honing the script further. And since the dialogue is in Hindi at the moment, what I'm doing is I'm just revising the Hindi dialogue, seeing what fits, what doesn't fit. Then I will discuss with the Hindi dialogue writer and then hone it further. But I have kept my self busy, as you just said, reading poetry, mainly trying to introduce Bengali poets to readers and listeners who don't understand Bangla, because I think beyond Rabindranath Thakur, very little is known about Bengali poets, and I think that it's very important. Some of them are so good that Jibanananda, Shakti Chattopadhyay, etc., that I think they deserve to be known all over the world, uh, not even nationally. So that was a kind of something that I was doing to keep myself occupied, to keep myself sane, and also to actually, with this kind of idealistic mission. But what I am actually worried about is the turn that cinema as we understand it, is going to take. That is worrying me, because we are supposed to, okay, we were supposed to start in June. We are not probably planning now to start around November, December, or maybe December, January. Okay. I have a feeling that we have to open up, because otherwise it will be a kind of war between life and livelihood. I think 90% of the people are going to contract COVID, and a very large percentage of that will actually recover. And then finally, COVID will just become another kind of flu. This is my feeling, but I could be wrong. But what I'm worried about, if that does not happen, then how are we going to do our filming? This is what has been worrying me. I have 6 days of shooting in a slum. Now, how are we going to do that shooting? I understand that we've been given certain guidelines. First of all, if I have to follow those guidelines, I can't, I really can't shoot at all, because anybody over 65 is not allowed. So that would make it very difficult for me to be the director. But
You
anyway,
can
I don't
change
think
them.
that
You can change them with makeup. Make them younger than
I
65.
can't. No, but seriously, apart from that, no, I think that will finally be allowed. But I think what we'll have to do is observe all the films that will be made before that, because there are many people are attempting to shoot, and we'll have to see how the filming goes and what happens. No more than 25 people are going to be allowed. But my strong feeling is that the character of film viewing and the character of cinema as we understand it is going to change, and that is what I'm worried about. And I'm hoping that in today's discussion, we are going to try and look at the other possibilities, the possibilities of cinema or the audiovisual medium in the future.
Mhm. Right. Uh, let's move on to Abhijit. Abhijit, you see, to start with, uh, the input conference, which was supposed to be held in Potsdam in the month of May, was shifted by a year. Now we don't even know whether it will be held in May 2021. And all your activities at the SRFTI probably are also on a standstill at the moment, right? Except for
Absolutely.
the teaching, online teaching. So what have your plans been during this period? What has gone wrong?
All my plans have gone topsy-turvy. Actually, I had 3 documentaries that they were all time specific. One particular documentary, I had to go to a place called Mayavati in Uttarakhand, and that only can be shot in May. It can be shot in April or even in June. Now 1 May is gone, and what you said just now makes me really worry. If this COVID syndrome extends till mid 2021, so I don't know. After that, would I be able to at all go and do the documentary? I really doubt. So I don't know. Yeah, it's possibly, many years ago I had gone somewhere, and there was this guy wearing a T-shirt. It said, "I'm happy because I don't know. I have no idea of what is going on." So I mean, it says all for me too. Or I don't know. I'm just smiling because I have no idea what's going on and what's going to happen. So that is it. I don't know.
Okay. So it's a big question mark.
It's a huge question mark.
Okay. Now, Shomika, probably some of this time came to you as a blessing in disguise because you're always so overloaded with projects and wanting to meet deadlines that they always cross the deadline. So probably this has come as a blessing in disguise that there are a lot of things which were pending which you could do during this period, or has it been otherwise?
You're right, Raju, uh, because I'm not concerned directly with filmmaking. So the problems that Aparna or Ko or Abhijit are facing are not my problems. My problem or my area of work has been teaching films, extending the scope, the possibilities of film studies in various directions. So working with books, making books, editing books, conceiving books, and proposing books. So at that level, initially, there was a crisis. Uh, the entire book industry virtually closed down. But somehow the book industry has come up again and started working. And I have several books on my table on which I'm working. Particularly, I'm quite excited about a project which was taking a lot of time, and now I've gone back to it, and I hope I can finish it in a month's time. I have been editing the complete prose works of Soumitra Chattopadhyay,
Mhm.
and we have published 2 volumes already. But what is interesting is in the third volume, in addition to his writings, not too many remain to be covered. In the third volume, we have a few. So we are going to annotate all his writings on cinema, his prose writing, and that brings in a lot of knowledge and information about films, not just the films he worked in, but the film culture, the larger culture out of which these films emerged, and his participation, his involvement also emerged through a long cultural history. So I'm
Mhm.
trying to reconstruct that cultural history as a supplementary reading to his texts. So that has been a very, very exciting work for me. And I'm right bang in the middle of it and enjoying it thoroughly.
Okay, that's wonderful. So you have been using your time also very productively during this period, yeah? So that
Right.
is nice to hear. I'll go back to Orgo now. Now, Orgo, let's come back to the industry. The industry is in the doldrums, right? Aparna has already mentioned about her own dilemma of how she's going to shoot and so on and so forth. But apart from that, there is also the other angle of life and livelihood, in film and television. A lot of people for whom the future seems to be absolutely bleak. Now, I'm not talking about directors like Aparna or editors who are established like you, but think of the people who are working, so many people working in television, so many people working in cinema. What is going to happen to all of them? The question of life and livelihood.
Well, it's a quite a valid question and quite a difficult one because I mean, even if I don't think about others, even if I think about just about myself, I am going to dry out of projects very soon. There are a few lying around, which will take for me a couple of months for me to complete. But after then, what? Unless new shootings happen, I don't have work. So it's not about being established or not established. If you don't have material, you can't work on it, at least in my kind of work. So
Mm.
I need to have material which have been gathered so that I can work on them. And that goes for any post-production person. So shooting has to happen for the whole industry to run with restrictions, without restrictions. But again, with restrictions, it's a kind of funny situation, very funny situation. So, and it's very hard to kind of shoot under those kinds of diktats. So it's a difficult kind of a thing. And you just can't have all the time teeny boppers moving around so that shootings can happen. So
Mhm.
the thing is that even if the shooting happens, it has to kind of come down to a certain kind of a earlier normalcy, not the new normal thing. So for that, if, as you said, if the next year, June is going to be the kind of a month, then it's going to be a very, very difficult task. Then I think a lot of us people have to kind of pool in resources and kind of, help each other out, that kind of a situation. And I am quite sure we are going to hear about a lot of other distressing news from various quarters of the industry coming in. God forbid that, but that we just can't, I'm apprehending those kinds of news to happen because it is a very tough situation. It is a very tough situation. And so I don't know, because again, we don't frame rules. The rules are being framed by somebody else. And of course, in discussion with film folks, but I don't know how far they are also going to come up with certain kind of proper solution. Because right now, no solution is that you can come up with that's going to help.
Move to Aparna. Now, you had already mentioned about all the difficulties that you're going to face when you go out to shoot again, even if it is, say, November, December, if you start. So let us presume that you start in November, December, and somehow or the other adjust your kind of shooting also to the new normal, in inverted commas, and finish your film shooting. Now, what is going to be the fate of the exhibition of these films? You see, because all the multiplexes, all the Inoxes or whatever are lying idle and closed at the moment, whether they will survive this kind of economic downfall is a thing that we have to wait and watch. There are some kind of jokes that are being circulated in WhatsApp also in a different way, saying, the Inox people, they were fleecing us for showing us a film and some popcorn and so on and so forth, and serves you people right that you have to shut down and so on, But on a serious note, what is going to be the exhibition channel in future? Are OTT platforms the only way out?
This is what I fear, that OTT platforms will probably be the only way out. Raju, I forgot to tell you when you were asking me what I was doing during this lockdown period, was that I also chaired the jury for a lockdown film festival. It was very interesting because these films were taken on cell phones, each were 3-minute long, and I was surprised at the quality. Now I'm beginning to wonder whether, I'm going a step further and beginning to wonder what actually the future of cinema is going to be. Whether it is going to become a kind of personal thing where you shoot your own film, edit it yourself, and then, put it out and figure out, it'll have to be figured out, some way of making money through it also. Or whether we're just going to stick to the OTT platform. This all depends on how long this the scare of COVID-19 lasts, whether a vaccine is discovered or a medicine is discovered, whether, we find that, no, it's just another flu and we will contract it sometimes. It will be a kind of mild kind of attack and we will recover, and it will just be relegated to the level of another flu, like say swine flu or whatever. But we don't know. All of this is, the only thing that is certain here is the uncertainty factor. Now, I'm just thinking, supposing it's just OTT platform, the nature of filmmaking will have to change. The number of choices that you get on OTT, I've seen, and I've said, I include myself as a viewer, you watch it for about 3 minutes, and then if it's not gripping enough, then you switch. This changes the very nature of cinema, actually. Watching it in a theater, in a darkened theater with other people, where you don't get to switch channels, is different from actually sitting in your own room, getting up for a cup of coffee, going to the bathroom, whatever, some people dropping in, stopping midway, watching the film again later. Now, all of this is very different. So what happens is, I'll give you an example. For instance, if you can, unless you have, say, the kind of caliber of filmmaking that, say, Inaritu has. For instance, when I saw Roma and I saw that first shot where the water was being swept and all kinds of things were being reflected on it. Now that shot gripped me there and then. And so I just couldn't switch channels. Either you have to have talent of that level, or your filmmaking has to be extremely fast paced and gripping, which means that you do away with things like, mood building and so on and so forth. So the very nature of films, uh, I fear, might change unless we're able to deal with this infection in in a viable way.
Mm-hmm. Abhijit, how is it with television? You see, you have a vast experience in the field of television, and television has been working at two or even more than two levels. You see, you have these soaps that people are glued onto every evening, which are far away, far removed from reality. What is going to happen to all that? What are they going to do? And then, of course, the umpteen number of news channels and things. Where are they going to source their things from if they cannot go out and shoot on the spot?
Raju, I'll take it up from where Aparna left. You see, there are three elements. One, you have a cinema or a television, a program, okay? Then you need some place where you exhibit. It could be a hall, it could be a channel, whatever it is, whatever be the platform. And then you need the audience, okay? Now, I'll give you one statistics. I'll share just one statistics with you, and this makes me really worried. Quicker Jobs, which has about 7 million active job seekers, and this is what they say. They say that desperate Indian graduates are now, they don't mind becoming drivers, maids, or mechanics. Okay? Their pockets are empty. They say that 19,000 graduates applied for the job of a sweeper in Madhya Pradesh. Sweeper. Over 80% of Indian engineering graduates are unemployable. Estimates show it's the same story for postgraduate. Almost 93% of MBAs aren't fit for jobs. Now, if that be so, who would be our audience? Who would have the money to buy a ticket to come into a cinema hall? Having said that, now you're talking about television, for instance. Now, if you want to know what happened to television, then you have to look back a little. There was a time when Doordarshan had produced excellent programs. You had programs like Bunyad and Hamlog and Rajni, Malgudi Days, what have you, Surabhi, what have you. And then one fine morning, what happened was there was a minister, unfortunately from this state. He sort of said that we should privatize. And in came Star TV and Z. Now you have to look back why it happened. You said that, talked about serials. Star TV began with The Bold and the Beautiful and what was the other one? Bold and the Beautiful and whatever. Mind you, The Bold and the Beautiful was already in the trash can in USA. And they were paying something like $2 royalty per telecast. And that's how, from one morning, it all changed. You started watching bikini-clad girls and kissing on screen. And that resulted in, Indian television serials falling for shock and awe. The sex scandal, sensationalism, superstition, and all that. So much so that there was one particular serial where I think Peredar Piaki or something, 18-year-old man, old woman gets married to a 9-year-old boy. Even that happened as a serial. And then you see, the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law things continuing. Go back a little. You had Udan in 1989 talking about women's empowerment. Aparna will bear me out. Udan took an IPS officer to a different level, a lady IPS officer to a different level. Today, the same IPS officer, Sandhya, is being harassed by her mother-in-law, and this is going on. So you see, what's happening is, one, the Aparna talked about, the treatment. It has to have pace in film, huge pace. Otherwise, people will fall for the, short attention syndrome problem. people don't have the attention span, all that attention span. So obviously, if you don't go to a dark cinema hall willingly and watch larger than life, you will have these distractions coming in. Okay, someone will come in and someone will have coffee, tea, whatever, what have you. But look at what happened during the lockdown. I'll give another statistics. Indians were spending 3 hours 48 minutes on smartphones. Watching what? Watching old reruns. Watching old reruns, not the new ones. Now, what does it, is that an indicator? I would like to ask both Orgo and Apurna, is that an indicator? 3 hours 48 minutes daily on smartphones, watching old serials. Is that an indicator of what is to come? Apurna, Orgo might like to speak on this.
Yeah, certainly that's a very good question. Whether the old serials are brought because they don't have new material to telecast, and some of these are appealing to people, and some other serials which are being brought back per force, so to speak, a rerun of the Mahabharata or the Ramayana or whatever it is.
Raju, forget about Mahabharata and Mahabharata. Old programs of Doordarshan throughout the two or 3 weeks on the TRP charts, they were right at the top. How is that possible? They had excellent content, but mind you, technically they were not as good as what we see today, technically. But content drove. They had a good story. Orgo, Apurna, please come in and
actually, you have given the cue. I was going to come to the point of content and form, you see. And I wanted to start with Shomikda over there, and I want Orgo and Aparna also to come in on this, because Shomikda, as critics of films and so on, we have always been talking about the magic of cinema, and we have always been talking about the content versus form issue, you see. And what is it is a driving force in a good film. So what do you think now with the digital world which has come to stay? Is all that discussion about content and form going into the dustbin?
I have 2 points to make, and I'd really love to listen to both Aparna and Orko answering the question that Abhijit raised. So before that, all that I would like to say, just 2 points in brief. A whole new viewership under pressure, under compulsion, has started watching films or TV programs, original TV programs on the TV screen. Who had not been watching these, were employed in other things. They had their jobs, they had the club life, they had the social life, and suddenly, with all this shutdown and lockdown, they are forced to watch things. So I think a large part of this section would go back to the old goodies rather than go for the excitement and the magic and the charm of the new contemporary business. That's at one level. So that, I think, would explain to a certain extent this going back to reruns. But I'm worried more about something else. The fact that the halls are closed, the theaters are closed, and we are willy-nilly accepting the new real that from now on we'll be just watching films either on the smartphone or maybe in more comfortable homes, the large TV screen, which brings you as close as possible to the old viewing experience. But in the process, something that is extremely problematic to me is the crisis of the privileged against the underprivileged. The underprivileged, a huge, massive majority of the underprivileged, do not have access either to the smartphone or, no question at all, of the large TV screen. We have cases already of girls, young school girls, driven to suicide because they didn't have access to a smartphone. So, cinema, whether we like it or adore it or not, the popular cinema, the mass cinema, which was the entertainment, which was a way of life, part of life for this large underprivileged constituency. Once that goes off, are we at all thinking of this problem where the divide between the privileged and the underprivileged grows and grows? This
Yeah.
adds to it now. Once we accept the new real of the home viewing as the only choice we have.
Yeah, it's very right that you bring up this question of the divide,
Can I
because
come in for a
this has,
moment, Raju? Can I come in for a moment?
yes, yes,
You know, according to the latest statistics, the mobile phones, I'm talking about smartphones, have penetrated deep into the rural India. And the internet consumption in rural India is much, much higher than urban India. That's the latest statistics, much higher.
okay. Of course, when it comes to statistics, it's always a question of the source of the statistics also,
This
because
is the Internet
No.
Association and Internet Mobile Association of India.
because we have all along joked that you have statistics and lies, so
No, but
the
yeah,
Exactly.
but
statistics all the time. Mhm.
Raju,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
if I may come in,
Yeah.
I tend to think that Abhijit is right. Judging by people we come across, like people who work for say as workmen for our homes, or judging by our drivers, or people who come for even beggars now have phones. Actually, I've even actually seen beggars begging on the streets, but actually talking on the phone. It's in fact become it's not a luxury anymore, because that's how they actually conduct their work also, because
Absolutely,
they
because
also
some of them even say that if you don't have change, pay me by Paytm.
yeah
Yeah,
well
yeah, I'm not joking. It is a fact.
yeah actually they do, and they're very very tech savvy, much more
Mm.
tech savvy than many of us. And this I've seen this myself. Body, people who mysteries who come home, or even the vegetable vendor who comes, whatever. I've seen this, and they come from far away. They don't necessarily live in Calcutta, but they
Right.
live outside Calcutta. Maybe not deep in the rural areas, but certainly, definitely outside Calcutta. And this I have seen. Now, what they watch mostly is either a rehash of Hindi film songs, remixes. And this I've seen a lot, that they watch remixes of Hindi film songs, or they watch the serials that go on, like, whatever is playing, because that's the easiest way to access any kind of entertainment. For instance, a maid at home, for instance, a domestic staff, what she will do in her leisure time is either on the phone or on the television. And now they ask you, before you employ them, is that is there a TV at home, and will I be able to watch? This is what the first question is, that. And so, watching television, watching whatever it is, Rani Rashmani, or I don't know all the names actually, because I'm not a TV watcher, but this is what I've seen them watching. Old people, domestic staff, and a whole lot of people on their smartphones. They watch rehashes of Hindi film songs, and so on and so forth. This is the kind of thing that they actually do. So what worries me is, see, Abhijit, you're saying that they were watching the old serials,
Reruns,
but
reruns
that's
of old series.
reruns. Yeah, that's also possibly because they weren't getting uh, any alternatives. Also, there's an element of nostalgia, and the stories are good. That's definitely there. But uh, Shomika is absolutely right. What about the underprivileged class? Now, how were the underprivileged class watching films? Were they watching in kind of tents where it is projected from from some sort of projector or pirated DVDs or what? How were they actually watching films before this? Deep, I'm talking about the deep interiors. I'm not even talking about people who go to, say, um, not leave aside multiplexes, but those single theaters. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the deep interiors. How were they watching films? I'm not really terribly, knowledgeable about this.
Aparna, I'll tell you what. There's a guy. Uh, Orgo, you must have seen it on History Channel. They ran a story. You know,
Yeah.
this guy has about 32 buses. Each bus go to interior rural areas, and they screen and they have a air-conditioned tent with 5.1 sound and all that, and they can erect the whole damn thing in about under 12 hours. Now, question is, can people go in without getting sanitized and temperature? What that I don't know. I'm talking about COVID situation, but films have gone deep into the rural India with this kind of mobile buses and things like that. Not the old, just you go and show. It's actually 5.1, huge tents, air condition and all that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Orgo, would you like to respond to what Abhijit had raised earlier?
No, what was that? I've got lost track of it.
No, Abhijit had wanted Orgo and Aparna to react to the question of, why there are people are going back to old
Okay.
things now also.
All right. I have an assumption is that, first of all, definitely what Reenadi said, that it's about nostalgia and the story was good. etc. Yes, that's definitely there. But apart from that, if you watch the modern day OTT platform content, you will find that most of it is catering to a certain kind of dark themes. And mostly they are kind of murder mysteries or any kind of mystery or something to deal with darkness of the human mind. Now one gets tired of it. Initially, you might start liking them because murder mysteries and these things are suspenseful horror stories. They are fine. They interest you. But soon enough, if you find a plethora of them, you tend to kind of be a little blasé about it and do not kind of take too kindly towards them. So I think to get away from that, and definitely the earlier products were much simpler and they were easy for the ears and easy for the eyes, and definitely much easier on the mind as well, because you didn't have too many kinds of plot twists and turns which were going to kind of really kind of tax your mind.
Make your mind think too much, yeah.
In a certain way, may I use a Bengali term, make it a little more GDP patch. So that kind of thinking process was not kind of there in those kinds of serials and stuff. So I think that kind of simplicity is definitely drawing a lot of attention.
Okay, but what Shomikda said about the divide is also very, very important. And I find it a little contradictory here to what Abhijit is saying now, you see, because Abhijit is giving us statistics and saying that, smartphones have actually reached rural India and we don't know about it. Okay, then in that case, why are we talking about this divide? Because nowadays the big debate is about the digital divide, right? And it is in places of learning too. I'm talking of universities which have not started online classes because they feel that at least 40% of the students will be left out of the digital classes because of the great digital divide. And this I find in contrast to what Abhijit is now saying, that, if everybody has access to a smartphone and internet connectivity is there in rural areas, then this problem should not exist actually. And doing things online must become much easier. So, which is why I have my doubts. Yeah.
Well, actually, the digital world has definitely created a certain kind of a divide.
Mm.
I mean, this is unquestionable because first of all, the moment it's digital world, that means you need to have something which has got computer access. Previously, it was the computers which had only computer access. Now, the phones have become mini portable computers. So that is there. But again, just having a phone is not good enough. You need to have certain kind of internet connectivity. That requires a certain kind of money. Well, just by saying rural area does not mean that people are not privileged enough, because in the rural area also you have privileged class, a certain kind of a privileged class. May not be like in the urban sector, but there is also a privileged and a non-privileged divide in the rural sector. So if you are talking about the non-privileged class in the rural sector, well, they may not be having access to all these kinds of modes, but definitely the privileged sector in the rural area, they would be having that kind of an access. Because even if you take a normal mode of cinema watching, even the non-privileged sector in the rural mode did not have that kind of an access. Well, if you talk about the video on wheels kind of a thing, which can get a little bit of a change out here, and we can have the same kind of thing, like what do you call these hard disks on wheels kind of a thing. You can project films. That's not a problem. But the fact is that will there be a kind of a collaborative kind of a scenario that we used to have, going together and kind of having a certain kind of a commune thing while watching a film? That is a big question. If that is not happening, even if it opens out into the rural area, I mean, I just don't see kind of tents opening up in the urban sectors and people are watching films in tents. It's not going to happen. If that would happen, then the cinema halls would open. Because before the cinema hall has to open, one thing is that, is the metro means of transportation getting opened? Because if the metro means of transportation gets opened, then I think cinema hall can start get opening. Otherwise not. Because both of them survive on the same logic of non-transformation or non-contactable kind of a thing in terms of disease.
Right, the metro as well as the suburban trains. You know, a lot of people
They
come
have to open first.
from suburban trains and then take local transport over here, right? Okay, now talking of the OTT platforms, right? We are of late also seeing a lot of these web series gaining in popularity. So do you think that the web series mode is going to win over the cinema mode in future?
Well, cinema has not won over theater. Serials haven't won over cinema. So web is going to be another addition. It's not going to win over anything.
Aparna, do you think the same as Orgo does? Do you feel the same way?
I don't know, because I find the people that I know, perhaps from the privileged class, a lot of people don't go to the theaters to watch movies, because, and which is why our Bengali films don't do that well, because they find the content not good enough.
Right.
What they do instead is they watch Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hotstar, Bullstar, whatever. That is what they watch. And there is another class that I'm talking about the, the young rising, what are they called? I've forgotten the term. The young rising sort of young people who are rising and who are doing well. This is what they watch. Mostly this is what they watch. And they do binge watching on weekends. And there is another class that I'm talking about who watch actually serials like on Z TV or, Star TV, or I'm talking about Bengal, and or they watch a Hindi serials. This is what they watch. But what, Raju, I'm more worried about is, apart, if everything goes back to normal, like Orgo says, and cinema halls do start opening and so on and so forth, then of course, yes, maybe we will go back to the old normal. But if the new normal is going to be wearing masks and being careful and maintaining social distancing, if all that happens, how are we going to make our films? How are we going to create content?
Mhm. Yeah, this is a
This is what I'm
question.
worried about.
Yeah, this is a question that is very, very important, of course. Abhijit, what is going to be the content of the future?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things. One is that, Raju, you had been to Input several times, and you have seen how, in the television world, at least, now I'm not talking about cinema, there have been many collaborative projects. Now, cinema and television both were basically the director's baby. I think soon enough we'll come to a state when it will be many directors' baby, meaning that you can have not only collaborating within India but across the whole world. It could be one story, 7 directors from 7 different countries. All those things, on television, it has been tried out and pretty successfully. And Raju, if you remember the 24-hour, if you remember, it's a German production,
Right.
and then all those things, exchanging, the barter system will come in. You do something for you, and I'll do something for you. All that. Then the audience must be, your story should be open-ended, like the German courtroom. If you remember, multiple edit possibilities. Then algorithm, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, all will play a very big role, I think. And you have to have very target specific approach: age, gender, education, rural, urban, all that. So basically, you make a film that takes you to a certain place, and then you have 2 or 3 roads which the audience then decides which road to take. So you have, from that point, is 3 different versions. Now, if we are talking about versioning, the easiest form of versioning we have seen in cricket and football and hockey and what have you. There was a time when you used to watch 5-day cricket, then it came to 1-day cricket, 60 overs, then 50 overs, now it's 2020. All that is because of the attention span. And then what has happened, people are not even watching 2020, they are watching a version of it. One could be the highlights, another could be the best outs, the best strokes, the best boundaries, the best bowling, and all that. These are versions of the same thing, re-edited versions. Could a story also have different versions which can be re-edited? Can
A story can have various versions. We can see right from Rashomon that you can have 4
precisely,
different versions of the same story.
Yeah.
And
precisely.
But
yeah,
how do we actually film? How
Mm.
do we actually, in terms of practical, terms, I mean, in practical terms, how do we actually film even those different versions?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Can't do it sitting at home.
No.
This is a collaborative effort.
Right.
Filmmaking is a collaborative effort. How do we actually, if this is the new normal, then how do we actually create that content, whether it's 1 version, 2 versions, 5 versions, 10 versions? How do
Right.
we create those versions?
I think the basic way of filming has to change. I was talking to a common friend of ours, Ranjan Palit, and he was telling me mobile cameras now have 100 into zooms and 8K video shooting and all. Right. Now, which would necessarily mean you shoot 8K on a mobile camera. So it's basically a one-man crew.
This is what I'm saying.
Okay. Now, this one-man crew, and then your story will have characters who need not come very close. You're playing around with. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not an authority, but story development, shooting, editing, music, graphics, language versions, and specifically one other area which, many years ago I had applied for Fulbright scholarship, and they threw me out. They literally kicked me out. Was when I said I want to do a film where there will not be any language. Okay, so languageless version. I'm not talking about subtitles, completely languageless versions. Now, if you can do a film without a language like Pushpak that we did many years ago, your audience is end to end of the world. Okay, that's your audience, huge audience. Now you have to connect. Now, how do you connect? How do you find like-minded people? All those things you have to take into consideration. Agree on multiple language versions also. Maybe that's another potential to earn money. language versions. All,
Yeah,
all
but
those things,
that's
I don't know.
already
Then,
that's already
another
happening.
major thing is the aspect ratio. You know,
Mm.
who are you doing it for? You want vertical or horizontal? 9:16 or 16:9. Instagram video is but they prefer vertical. According to them, 98% people watch it on vertical mode. So I don't know. I'm confused. Maybe Orgo can come in on this.
Before Orgo comes in on this, Shomikda, can you reconcile yourself to the fact that you're watching even now or maybe in the near future films only on Netflix or Amazon Prime or things like that? Are you doing that already, or can
No,
you
no, no.
imagine yourself doing
No,
that in the near future?
absolutely no.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely no.
So what would that mean? That you don't watch cinema at all after that?
The only compromise I make is that if a friend has a large screen and I have a video copy, or they have it on YouTube, or they have got hold of a copy, I go back to these films. But that's a very, very private personal choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really worried about the large audience
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
for so many different kinds of films. So
And
is that world
they are not
gone
going to get it.
forever?
They are
They're not
probably
going to
not going to
get it.
get it. Yeah. Mhm. Right. Orgo, would you like to react to what Abhijit said about these formats,
Yeah,
vertical,
I think there are
horizontal?
going to be additional formats.
Mm,
Nothing is going to take over anything, because
mm,
once, like you see, we have had silent films, then kind of audio came and kind of changed a lot of things. But now, even when we have these rare instances of certain kind of silent films being made, silent in the sense no word films, not entirely silent. We have music and the other kind of effects happening, but no word films. So even when those things are happening, so it's not entirely that we are saying that silent films are absolutely out. So
mhm,
that becomes another kind of an experimental thing right now. So all these things, 9 is to 16, 16 is to 9, vertical, horizontal, square, whatever, even we have had academy aperture to start with. Now that
mhm,
changed to certain kind of 17 millimeter. Then it became 16 is to 9. Then it became HD. Then it became CinemaScope. Now everything is there. Now it depends on what you want to choose. So that's
yeah,
great. We have had black and white films. Now
mhm,
people in the days of color, so to say, which is now, people do tend to like a lot of black and white material. Like Rinadi was talking about Roma. Roma is a black and white film, and what a lovely
mhm,
film. So
yeah,
it's not that black and white has been pushed aside, because with all new kinds of discoveries in this digital or cinema world, the earlier one, it takes a little bit of beating, but it can survive. And
mhm.
everything is going to survive through time. Now it depends on the maker how one utilizes the format with the content and fuse them together.
Okay, we are actually running out of time, but I would like each one of you to come with a last kind of concluding remark or statement. And I would like to hear from each one of you. Uh, from here, where do we go? Like, if the situation remains like this, give us two versions. One is a utopian version of what you would like to visualize for the future, and another a compromised version, thinking that it is not going to be as easy as it is going to be. So, what lies ahead? So, would you like to comment on that, Aparna? Then Abhijit, and then of course, Argo and Shomikda would also finally comment on what he would like, or what we would like as audiences, you see.
Ideal situation for me is going back to the old normal. People will contract COVID. People, uh, 90% of them will recover, and it will be another disease which doesn't really set back everything. But, but it is possible that COVID is going to become such a dangerous kind of virus that something which we have never come across before, and the new normal is going to change. In such a scenario, I'm just wondering whether it will have the same kind of effect of having personalized films in the same way that photography had when the single lens reflex came in.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, before that, photography was a huge kind of elaborate affair. But once the single lens reflex came in, then it became a personalized art form. Whether film is going to become that, and if that is the case, then what happens to the commerce part of it?
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's a
these
very
are
important thing.
questions that I'm leaving. I'm just going to end with a question because I
Hmm.
don't know.
Yeah, the commerce part of it is very important. You see, earlier Olga was mentioning about this halls possibly reopening. Now I'm asking from the economic point of view also. There are a lot of hall owners who are saying that if this continues for another 6 months, we have to shut down our halls and go into some other
Exactly.
business, because this is happening with restaurants also. You know,
Yeah.
many restaurants are saying that we can't continue with this kind of business anymore because the losses that are mounting now, it's a point of no return, right? So
Yeah.
that is a huge, huge problem. And Obiji, the kind of statistics you gave in the village, you see, the rural area people always find a kind of employment opportunity in everything, whether it be a tent cinema or whatever it may be. Recently, with the phones which they had access to, a very popular kind of money earning thing was making things on TikTok, which also has been banned now. But I know of people in the rural areas who have been making little videos on TikTok and selling them for money in the rural areas, and that they saw as a kind of source of income. So that was a kind of improvisation that they did. That I don't know. You know, people always come up with some ideas of making money through any kind of situation, but this kind of situation is pretty bad. So, Obijit, what do you think lies ahead for us?
Raju, change is a way of life. You have to accept it, whether you like it or not. Okay. And whatever little I know, whatever little I have read, is that COVID is something like a cancer. It has various forms. So even if you come out with a vaccine, I don't know whether it'll be able to contain all these strains of COVID. Now, having said that, I would say that we should be mentally prepared to go in for alternatives. And the alternatives would be, we have to have uh, excellent writers. Content. I still believe content is the king. The story is what matters. Not whether it's black and white or color or whether those are embellishments. That's how I see it. Ultimately, it is the story that drives. People are fed up of murder, drug, mystery, crime, lust. No, what the hell is happening? You have nothing else in this world?
You say that content is the king, the story is the most important thing. I am going to ask the others also whether it is a story that is most important or the art of the storytelling that is more important.
Art of the
The
storytelling.
way you tell the story.
Well, I definitely feel art of the story because there will be cases where there is actually no story, but you are given to feel that there is a story.
Yeah.
So it's the art of the narrative. More than the story, I think it's the narrative which is very important. How do you put across the narrative? But then, cinema is a medium which is not like radio where you hear the story, where you need to see the story develop also. How is that going to happen? Because people are going to come together to make the story happen. So are we going to have cinema versions of Waiting for Godot version 1, version 2, version 3 that way? That is perhaps the most minimal way of cinema that we can perhaps imagine. Or we are going to have a solo person doing solo acts. Because more than that, we need some kind of closeness in, with people. Not that they have to hug at every point, but they need to stand close and sit close and talk.
Yeah.
That's the minimum.
Yeah. Shomikda, how do you visualize things? Story, what? Story important? What else?
Of course, the
Hmm.
art of storytelling and the art facing up to the challenge in the strange new normal. How to tell a story, even the way to tell a story would have to change and would have to work with this whole situation. And the other maybe utopic vision that I have is that cinema has always been at one level something for different constituencies. All films are not for all people. And with the divisiveness at so many levels globally, economic divides, political divides, caste, communal divides, more and more of divides coming in. So maybe the cinema audience gets divided and filmmakers choose segments, groups, sections, constituencies.
Mhm.
And maybe then cinema reaches a large enough audience, but doesn't reach them together in the same space, in the same situation. And if that is the new problem, that is the new utopia, I think there can be technological means, approaches, and artistic approaches making use of the technology to create these several audiences and several kinds of cinema to feed all of them, rather than put all of them into one basket.
Aparna, do you think what Shomikda says, would you go with that?
I really don't know because firstly I can't figure out how the commerce will work out. Of course, if films become a kind of very personal thing, and you have different kinds of stories where you tell a story. As I said, we did this lockdown film festival of 3-minute films, and some of them were brilliantly done, and very engaging also. Some were funny, some were philosophical, some were aesthetically pleasing, all kinds of ways. But what I'm trying to say is that those films then, if it's a one-man crew or a 2-3 person crew, then that film will cost much less.
Mhm.
It will cost much less. So the
Right.
recovery will be easier.
It will be
Now,
easier.
whether we can, yeah, whether we can figure out a way of selling such films, whether it'll be just small little things that, but I really think that people do need the experience of watching something on the big screen together. I don't think people are ready for this yet. But then, circumstances will dictate. I mean, just as
Mhm.
we left the typewriter behind and went onto the computer, and brother went out of existence practically, or Kodak practically went out of existence because the digital medium was discovered. But we'll have to find ways to move on. I mean,
Mhm.
if this really happens.
It has been quite a fascinating session, touched on a lot of points. So, Shomikda, any concluding remark?
Leave it to you.
And a long live cinema or long live Corona, whatever. What would be a concluding remark? Orgo?
Corona, you're a crown of thorns.
Corona, you're a crown of thorns. Aparna?
I think we'll beat Corona yet.
Of course, I think. Ovijit?
We must.
Yeah,
And
we
we should
have
also
to.
at the same time be prepared to change.
Yes, we are already changing. We are all under house arrest. We have changed our schedules. We have changed our routine. We are finding new ways of keeping ourselves busy. So that is happening in any case. So it is a compulsion. I often think of Corona as a kind of Kalki avatar, which was predicted among as the 10th avatar
Yes.
that is going to come, right?
Right.
I sometimes do think of it that way. But I'm
I think
sure,
of it as I think of it as some sort of alien civilization that has come in the form of a virus.
uh-huh. Be as it may, I think even this will pass. And of course, there will be uh, challenges, but we will always find new ways of keeping this kind of cinema or television art alive in whatever way it may be. And whether it be in the way that Shomikta has said, that we will have compartmentalized audiences for different kinds of films, or whether we are going to do it in such a way that it is going to appeal to a larger audience altogether, whether OTT is going to be the only platform in future, whether cinema halls are going to reopen again and have the same kind of hustle bustle that they had earlier, or whether the social distancing is going to economically tell them that, it's not viable anymore unless they sell more popcorn and more colas or whatever it may be. So we don't know. Lots of questions, lots of question marks in this discussion, of few suggestions of solutions and so on. Let us also be surprised as to how things pan out in future. Thank you very much, all of you, for this wonderful
Thank you,
discussion.
Raju. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.